Drew here, and did anybody really think the Demises did it? I have to ask. But this was a more typical episode of Only Murders in the Building. Last week I thought was probably the most brilliant episode of the series, and the episode that honestly put the series on the whole over the top for me is just being like, oh wow, this is a good show. And I think that the resolution of the mystery is going to be the last piece in deciding whether or not this is just a fun diversion or if this show has something more to say about the true crime genre. And I've cataloged a lot of suspects. There's so many, but if I had to guess, my top suspect at this point is Jackie Hoffman's character for reasons established this episode. But before I get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about my general impressions of the episode. I think that overall, like I said, not as brilliant as last episode. I was dissatisfied with a couple things this episode, although I really did enjoy it for the most part. Once again, 30 minutes, not that much to talk about, but I enjoyed the inclusion of the Arconiaks, this fan group that is obsessing over the podcast. In an interesting twist, in a lot of shows these days when people interact with fans and fan cultures, it's kind of a negative experience. But this show, in keeping with the lighter, more, wholesome tone, they have positive interactions with this group of fans. They're not toxic fans, and they even help them realize some things about the case that they hadn't realized themselves. For instance, that it's probably two people based on logistics. I wish they had hashed out what they meant by that a little bit more.
Logistics and the timing with the fire alarm that night.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah.
And that the detail that Tim Kono had gotten a trash bag from the 6th floor, which doesn't make sense since his apartment is on a different floor. This goes into my theory of why I think it's Jackie Hoffman's character, because it was established in a previous episode that she's on the same floor as the Demises. And you have to ask yourself if an actress the caliber of Jackie Hoffman is just here to scowl at Steve Martin, or if there's something more to her inclusion in this series. And also, when she was shown listening to the podcast this episode, she was shown with another woman. So if it was two individuals, then it could be her, because she clearly has someone that could have helped her. So that's my top theory at the moment, but we'll see. Otherwise, this episode, though, I really thought the best scene from a humor perspective was the reenactment of Tim Kono's death. And I feel like if you paid attention to Mabel's reaction to this scene, I think some of the humor was dissipated because clearly, they're reenacting the death of someone that she cares about. And we learned this episode that he had left this video on his phone for Oscar, telling him that not telling him, but saying that, I'm trying to clear him. I'm trying to make up for what happened to him. So, at the end of the day, it seemed at first that Tim Kono was not a nice guy, but it was actually a front. He was a good guy the whole time. So this revelation kind of makes the fact that we're watching this reenactment of what potentially happened to him, how he died, a little bit jarring, to say the least. I also really liked the banter between Oliver and Jan.
Thank you for inviting me into this.
Although we didn't.
I'm sorry?
Our pleasure. It's great.
But of course, the suspects here, the Demises, I was a little disappointed with how quickly that situation wrapped up. I have a hard time believing that Teddy would just let Oliver and Mabel go like that. But on the other hand, it is someone that he claims to be friends with, and it's unclear how much of his threats of violence is something that he's actually capable of, and how much of it is just something that he puts out there to accomplish what he wants. We haven't actually seen him do anything violent to anyone. We've just seen him threaten people. Otherwise, though, so the Demises go down as the top suspect. I don't know why Demas thought that Oliver and the others wouldn't publish a podcast at this point. He just doesn't have enough leverage on them. Like, he can threaten them, but odds are that nothing's going to happen to them if they take him down in a really public way, as they do. But of course, as I think any one of us who has seen the template for this show, how there's a red herring person, that person gets eliminated, and then we go on to the real suspect. And if you can look at episode counts, I think you would have predicted, you know what, there's 2 episodes left. It can't be them. They're too obvious, as Jan says, although in real life, that's never a reason to eliminate someone as a suspect. But of course, it turns out that the 2 of them were on camera in the courtyard of the Arconia when Tim Kono was murdered, so they couldn't have done it. And it also turns out that Tim Kono had been poisoned prior to being shot, and an interesting wrinkle. So what that means, not exactly sure yet, but certainly, this show is keeping up its interesting developments. And I think the most shocking development was that Jan appears to have been injured in some way. It was unclear if she'd been stabbed or shot or what, but at the end of this episode, Charles finds her in her apartment covered in blood. And you see this note posted on her door earlier in the episode that says, "I've been watching you." So it'll be interesting to see how she fits into the puzzle that is this mystery. It certainly seems as though there's a lot more going on, and I'm surprised that they're opening so many doors, as you would think that they would be starting to shut doors on this season. But I'm hoping that the next 2 episodes can wrap up at least the murder of Tim Kono with a bow. This show has been renewed for a 2nd season, and I see a lot of potential there. But I do think that they should do a completely different mystery, and I'd like to see them tie off all the threads this season. That would make me more interested to come back. But those are just my thoughts for what they are worth. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows, please consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching.